ASMR content from me, I do have my original ASMR channel always linked in the description box below. Also, as always, my notes and my script are going to be on this side of the screen, which is why I will be looking over there throughout this video quite a bit. So without further ado, let's just get started. So first we're going to start with the background of the family and just the background of the case. So the Keddie cabin murders took place in 1981 in the small rural town of Keddie, located in Plumas County, Northern California. This case has since become infamous due to its brutality and the mysterious circumstances that continue to surround it. I'm going to bring you guys a little closer. To understand the full picture of what happened on that fateful night, it is essential to dive into the lives of the family involved. The Sharp family, at the center of the Keddie cabin murders, consisted of Glenna, or Sue as she was called, Sharp, and her 5 children: John, 15, Sheila, 14, Tina, 12, Rick, 10, and Greg, 5. The Sharps had moved to Keddie in November 1980, just a few months before the murders. Sue, a 36-year-old single mother, had left a difficult marriage and was trying to rebuild a new life for her family. Her estranged husband, James Sharp, was abusive, and Sue had made the brave decision to move her children far away and to start over. Sue's decision to relocate to Keddie was influenced by her sister, who lived nearby in Quincy, California. The move to Keddie, a small, remote town, seemed like an opportunity to provide her children with a better and safer life. However, Sue struggled with finances, and the family was living on a modest income, surviving mostly on welfare payments. The Sharp family lived in cabin 28, a small and somewhat dilapidated cabin in Keddie Resort. The resort was a former vacation destination, that had fallen into decline, and the cabins were now rented out to low-income families and individuals. Despite the challenges, Sue tried her best to create a stable environment for her children. She was described as quite fierce but independent, often keeping to herself. She was enrolled in a job training program and was taking college courses with the hope of improving her financial situation and providing a better future for her children. However, the family's life was not without difficulties. Sue struggled with the emotional toll of raising 5 children alone, particularly with the rebellious behavior of her eldest son, John. Keddie was an isolated and somewhat forgotten community by the time the Sharp family moved there. The resort, a once popular destination, had lost its luster. Keddie itself was a small, quiet town with few amenities, and the community was tight-knit, although there was a sense of economic struggle and isolation. The cabins in the resort were close to one another, and neighbors often interacted with each other. However, the remoteness of the location meant that there were few jobs, and many of the residents, like Sue Sharp, relied on relationships within the community. John Sharp, who was 15 years old at the time, was described as somewhat of a troublemaker. He was rebellious and had a group of friends who also lived in Keddie, including a boy named Dana Wingate, who would become a key figure in the events leading up to the murders. Despite his teenage rebellion, John was close to his mother and siblings and had a protective relationship with his younger brothers and sisters. Sheila, Sue's 14-year-old daughter, was more responsible and helped her mother care for her younger siblings. She was active in school and had several friends in the area. Dina, the middle child, was quieter and more introverted. She was close to her mother and was often overshadowed by her older siblings. The younger Sharp children, Rick and Greg, were still in elementary school and were described as typical boys. They spent most of their time in and around the cabin, playing with friends from the neighborhood. Now we're going to go into the time leading up to the night of the murders. So, in the weeks and days leading up to the murders, life for the Sharp family seemed relatively normal, though Sue was still grappling with her financial difficulties. Her goal of improving her family's financial situation by attending school and participating in her job training program was progressing, but it was clear that the family lived with considerable hardship. On the day of the murders, Saturday, April 11th, 1981, the Sharp family's day began like any other. Sheila, the eldest daughter, spent the day at the home of her friend, the Siebold family, who lived in a cabin nearby. John and his friend Dana Wingate spent the day in Quincy, the nearby town, hitchhiking back and forth between Keddie and Quincy. That night, Sheila decided to spend the night at the Siebold's home, leaving her mother and siblings alone in cabin 28. This seemingly mundane decision would later save her life. John and Dana returned to cabin 28 later that night after spending time in Quincy, and the rest of the family settled in for the evening. Unbeknownst to the Sharp family, the events of that night would lead to one of the most brutal, unsolved murder cases in American history. On the night of April 11th, in cabin 28, the Sharp family and their close family friend Dana Wingate were brutally attacked in a horrifying manner. The events of that night, coupled with the discovery of the crime the following morning, remain shrouded in mystery and speculation. The evening of April 11th began fairly normal for the Sharp family. Sue Sharp was home with her two youngest sons, Rick and Greg, along with her friend Justin Smart, who was spending the night at the Sharp home. Justin was the son of Martin and Marilyn Sharp, neighbors and family friends who lived in a nearby cabin. Of course, John and Dana had spent the day again in Quincy, but were back in the cabin, and Dana was spending the night. They returned that night between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. It is believed that the group settled in for the night after their return, while Sue remained at home as she usually did. Sometime during the late hours of April 11th or the early morning of April 12th, the exact timeline is still unknown, unknown assailants entered cabin 28 and carried out a brutal attack. The timeline of events inside the cabin remains somewhat unclear due to the lack of eyewitness witnesses and the fact that much of the evidence was contaminated or not properly preserved in the aftermath of the crime. What is known, however, is that John Sharp, Dana Wingate, and Sue Sharp were all killed in the living room of the cabin. The level of violence used in the murders were extreme and suggested deep rage or personal animosity. All 3 victims were bound with medical tape and electrical wire, their movements restricted before they were murdered. John Sharp and Dana Wingate suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, likely caused by a hammer or similar instrument. John's injuries were so severe that his head was bashed in, leaving him incapacitated. Dana was strangled and also bludgeoned. Sue Sharp, meanwhile, was the most viciously attacked. She had been gagged with a bandana and her underwear, and her mouth was taped shut. She was stabbed multiple times in her chest and throat, with one wound so deep that it penetrated her larynx. It is believed that the assailants used a wide variety of weapons during the attack, including a hammer, 2 knives, one of which was later found bent at the scene, and possibly other unidentified objects. The sheer brutality and overkill indicated that the crime was more than just a random attack. It presented as personal. During the attack, Dana Sharp, the 12-year-old middle child, was either abducted or removed from the cabin at some point. Her fate was not discovered until years later when her remains were found, though the exact details of her abduction and murder remain unclear. Remarkably, the younger children, Rick, Greg, and their younger friend Justin Smart, were found unharmed in a bedroom in the back of the cabin. It is unclear whether they slept through the attack or whether they were hiding, but they were left untouched by the killers. The reason why I said that it was unclear was because their accounts changed. At some points they would say that they were sleeping, and then at other points they said that they heard the attack but decided to stay in and hide. They were very, very young at the time, so their accounts are just pretty unreliable, so that part is not really that clear. On the morning of April 12th, 1981, Sheila Sharp returned home from her overnight stay at the Siebel cabin. As she approached her family's cabin, she was met with a scene of unimaginable horror. Upon entering the front door, Sheila immediately saw the bodies of her brother, John, Dana Wingate, and her mother, Sue, in the living room, sprawled out on the floor amidst a pool of blood. She ran screaming back to the Siebel cabin, where the family quickly called the authorities. The Plumas County Sheriff's Office responded to the scene shortly afterward, and what they found inside the cabin shocked even the most experienced law enforcement officers. The scene was bloody, chaotic, and horrifying, with clear signs of a struggle. However, it became apparent that the crime scene was also mishandled. In the chaos of the initial discovery, crucial evidence was contaminated and or destroyed. Several individuals entered the cabin after the murders were discovered, possibly destroying potential evidence and complicating the investigation. Rick, Greg, and Justin were found unharmed in the bedroom, and when questioned, they claimed to have slept through the attack. Justin, however, later recounted that he might have witnessed part of the crime in a dream-like state, or had a vague memory of seeing some of the attackers. His recollections, though, were inconsistent and could not Some theorize that the boys may have been too frightened to speak about what they had seen, while others believe they did not witness the murders at all. The authorities quickly realized that Tina Sharp was missing. This prompted a massive search effort, but despite the efforts of local law enforcement and volunteers, there was no sign of Tina. The crime scene itself was puzzling to investigators. Blood was found throughout the living room, but the lack of defensive wounds on some of the victims suggested that they may have been subdued or restrained early on in the attack. There were signs of an intense struggle, especially around the bodies of Sue and John, with furniture knocked over and blood splatter across the walls and floor. Investigators also noticed that the telephone line to the cabin had been deliberately cut, indicating premeditation. This led them to believe that the attackers had planned their actions and possibly had knowledge of the family's movements prior. Despite the brutal nature of the attack, there were no immediate signs of forced entry. It was speculated that the killers may have been known to the family and had been let in voluntarily. Another possibility is that they entered through an unlocked door, which was not uncommon in rural areas at the time such as this. Law enforcement collected several pieces of evidence, including the bent knife and hammer used in the attack. However, most evidence, such as potential fingerprints or other forensics, was either missed or mishandled. In the days and weeks following the murders, several suspects were interviewed, but no arrests were made. The case quickly became cold due to the lack of substantial leads. The mystery of Tina Sharp's disappearance continued for 3 years. Then, in April 1984, a startling discovery was made. A human skull was found near Feather Falls, about 50 miles away from Keddie, in a remote and rugged area. A short time later, more skeletal remains were located, and dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Tina Sharp. The discovery of Tina's remains reignited interest in the case, but it also raised more questions than answers. How had Tina been taken so far from the cabin? What happened to her in the hours or days after the murders? The circumstances surrounding her abduction and murder remain one of the most perplexing aspects of the Keddie case. The Keddie cabin murders have remained unsolved for over 4 decades, and throughout that time, various theories and speculations have emerged regarding who killed the Sharp family and Dana Wingate. The brutality of the crime, the lack of clear suspects, and mishandling of evidence have contributed to a cloud of uncertainty surrounding the case. But below are some of the most significant theories that have been proposed during the years. So the first one is the Martin Smart and Bo Bed theory. He was called Bo. One of the most widely discussed theories centers on Martin Smart, the father of Justin Smart, who was present in cabin 28 on the night of the murders. Smart lived in a nearby cabin with his wife Marilyn and their children. His proximity to the Sharp family, his known violent tendencies, and his strange behavior after the murders have led many to consider him a primary suspect. Let's go over his background a little bit. Martin Smart was a Vietnam War veteran who reportedly suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. His military experience has been speculated reports of domestic violence in their home, which raised further concerns about his potential for committing violence. After the murders, Smart allegedly made several incriminating statements as well. According to Marilyn, Martin had mentioned that he hated John Sharp, Sue's eldest son, who was killed in the attack. Additionally, it was revealed that Smart had supposedly confessed to the murders in a session with the therapist, but this was never confirmed with law enforcement. Now, the Bo guy that I was talking about earlier, we're going to talk about his possible involvement, which is linked to Martin Smart. So his background is Bo, a man with ties to organized crime, was staying with the Smart family at the time of the murders. Bo had a criminal record and had served time in prison. He was reportedly a drifter who had only recently come to Keddie. His background in criminal activities and his close association with Smart raised suspicions about his involvement. Some theories suggest that Smart and Bo may have conspired together to carry out the murders. One possible motive centers around Smart's hatred of John and Sue, who allegedly encouraged Marilyn to leave him. Smart may have sought revenge on Sue and her family for her influence over his wife, and Bo may have assisted him in carrying out the attack. In later interviews, Marilyn Smart stated that she believed her husband, Martin, and Bo were responsible for the murders. She also claimed that on the night of the crime, she left her husband after an argument and was unaware of his whereabouts after. Marilyn eventually left Martin and began speaking out about her suspicions. In 1984, again, law enforcement officials revealed that Martin had confessed to the murders during a therapy session, but his confession was never properly investigated or reported. Despite this, Smart and Bo were never formally charged, and both men eventually left the Keddie area. Bo died in 1988 and Smart died in 2000, taking their potential knowledge of the crime with them. Now, the second theory is called the love triangle theory. Another theory that has emerged suggests that the motive for the murders may have been connected to a romantic relationship or a love triangle involving Sue Sharp and Martin Sharp. Some have speculated that Sue and Martin may have been romantically involved, and the murders were the result of jealousy or a personal dispute. There were unconfirmed rumors in the community that Martin Smart, oh my god, I'm getting them confused, and Sue Sharp may have had an affair of some kind before the murders. This has never been proven, but it led to the possibility of the attack on Sue and her family being personal, fueled by jealousy or betrayal. If there were any truth to these rumors, it could suggest that Marilyn Smart may have known about the relationship and that the murders were an act of revenge or jealousy. However, again, Marilyn has publicly stated that she believes Martin was responsible for the murders, though she did not indicate any affair between Sue and her husband. The theory posits that Martin Smart, possibly assisted by Bo, killed the Sharp family out of a personal vendetta, potentially driven by a combination saw an increase in drug activity during the late 70s and early 80s. The proximity of Keddie to major drug trafficking routes has led to the belief that the murders could have been connected to illegal drug activities. There were rumors that John Sharp and Dana Wingate may have been involved in drug use or drug trafficking, though these claims were never really substantiated. Some have suggested that the murders were a drug hit gone wrong, targeting John and Dana but leading to the deaths of Sue and Tina as collateral damage. The theory suggests that drug dealers, perhaps operating in the region, may have targeted John and Dana because of a drug-related conflict. However, again, there has been no substantial evidence that has ever surfaced to indicate that John or Dana were involved in drug dealing or that drugs played a role in the murders. The next theory is the multiple assailants theory. So this theory basically states that the complexity of the crime scene and the brutality has led to the belief that more than one person was involved in the killings. Many believe that at least two and possibly more people attacked the family due to the following reasons. So this theory basically states that it wasn't just one killer because several weapons were used in the attack, including the hammer and the two knives. The victims were also bound with medical tape and electrical wire, which would have required time and coordination. Subduing and controlling multiple victims, particularly strong teenage boys like John and Dana, likely required more than one attacker. The next theory is the law enforcement cover-up theory. Another popular theory among those who have followed the case is that there was a cover-up involving local law enforcement. Proponents of this theory argue that the Plumas County Sheriff's Office mishandled the investigation, possibly to protect certain individuals involved in the crime. There is ample evidence that the crime scene was mishandled by investigators. Key evidence was either lost, improperly stored, or destroyed, and there was a general lack of follow-up on crucial leads, including the potential involvement of Martin Smart and Bo, like that confession. The sheriff at the time, Doug Thomas, was allegedly friends with Thomas Smart, leading some to speculate that Thomas deliberately steered the investigation away from Smart and Bo. Of course, Sheriff Thomas has denied any such allegations, but the perception of a conflict of interest remains. Now, the final theory that we're going to be discussing is the possibility that it was either a serial killer and or just a stranger. So while most theories focus on individuals connected to the Sharp family or the Keddie community, there is of course always the possibility that the murders were the work of a random killer or serial killer passing through the area. Although this theory is less commonly discussed, it is still a consideration given the lack of definitive evidence linking anyone specific to the crime. Keddie's location, while remote, is near highways and roadways that could have been used by transient individuals or criminals moving throughout the area. A random killer may have targeted Cabin 28 without knowing the family, simply choosing the location because it appeared isolated and vulnerable. The lack of a clear motive for the murders, if the killers were not known to the family, suggests that the possibility that the crime was random, perhaps carried out by an individual or individuals passing through saw an opportunity for violence. Tina's drug connections, or even law enforcement cover-ups all paint different pictures of what could have happened on the night of April 11th, 1981. Despite the passage of time, no definitive answer has been found, and the case remains unsolved to this day. The Sharp family and Dana Wingate's family continue to seek justice, and new advancements in forensic technology may one day provide answers to the enduring mystery of the Keddie murders. So, one thing that I do want to discuss about this case is that I find what happened to Tina so important and strange. There's just so many questions surrounding that. I didn't want to include like a theory that people didn't really talk about, but something that was always in my head was sort of, it was weird to me that nobody ever really spoke about a theory regarding Tina, because why would they take Tina out of the cabin? It almost seems like it could be possible that she was actually the target of the attack and they wanted to abduct her specifically for whatever reason, and the family was just collateral damage. I find it very strange that that's not a theory, because they could have just killed her right there and left her in the house, but they didn't. What's really frustrating is that we really don't know when she was killed, because of the state of the body when it was found. She could have been murdered right then and moved for whatever reason, or she could have been kept for any amount of time, and then killed later and then buried. She was found 50, not 15, not 15, 50 miles away, which makes me think that she wasn't just killed and then dumped somewhere else for whatever reason. She was found a decent amount away, which seems so much more deliberate to me. Again, I just find that so weird, and I have so many unanswered questions about that. But if we are disregarding that, the theory that I personally believe of the ones being perpetuated, I do believe that Martin Smart and that Bo guy did have some involvement. I just think that there's too much evidence there, especially because the thing about the investigation is that it was mishandled so badly that it had to have been on purpose, because just so many really catastrophic mistakes were made. So I do believe that the sheriff did, I think it's very possible that the sheriff did have that connection with Martin Smart and covered it up to save his friend. Again, Martin Smart literally confessed to his therapist that he committed this crime, and the sheriff's county was like, nah, we're not gonna look into that. They literally did not look into it. It was actually insane. When I was reading that, I was like, what? So I just don't see how that happened by accident. But I do think that there is something that we're all collectively missing regarding Tina. I do think that she had a bigger role in this than everybody thinks. It could have been possible that, I don't want to suggest this, it's so icky, but I feel like it could have been possible that Martin Smart was targeting Tina, because he as a predator, and also had whatever vendettas against the family, and decided to just kill the rest of them and then abduct Tina, kill her later. I feel like that's very possible as well. But like I said, both of those men have passed away since then, so even if they did do it, no justice can really be served on that front, unfortunately. But that is all I have to say about this case. I hope that you guys enjoyed tonight's video.